If you deal with a whole lot of hiccups, then you know that hiccups can be real annoying. So in this video, I'm going to help you understand some circumstances that may be creating these frequent hiccup issues and steps you can take to you don't hiccup all the time. Here we go.
T.C. Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
So a hiccup is like this chain reaction that seems to be triggered when this diaphragm goes into spasm. And the diaphragm here is just like this muscular structure that kind of separates the upper cavity from the lower cavity. And you can see the esophagus kind of goes through that diaphragm. But it appears that there are different things that can basically irritate or bother this diaphragm structure that creates these spasms. And it appears that there's a variety of things that can make this happen. And we see things like gastrointestinal disorders and GERD and even a hiatal hernia. And a hiatal hernia here is when this esophagus and stomach is kind of pulled up through that diaphragm. Maybe there's like a little tear or hernia in that diaphragm, so that the stomach can go up there and then it's kind of jacked up and everything doesn't really work the way it's supposed to. But also this reflux coming up, it appears that that acid may be irritating this structure. We also hear about hyperventilation and even some metabolic disorders where maybe there's glucose dysregulation or even some mineral deficiencies or displacements that have the ability to create problems with this diaphragm where it's going to go into spasm and make these hiccups kind of happen when, this glottis thing closes real fast and air is just moving too fast and we get that hiccup type sound. But there appears to be a variety of issues that can create this, but in this video we want to talk about a specific problem that may be causing this hiccup issue to show up a lot for some people. And when you look up the triggers, like what's going to make me have hiccups, you see things like eating too fast or talking too fast, or really laughing a lot, or maybe a lot of excitement or stress. And when you look up, okay, how do I fix these hiccups? What are the things that work for most people? Because you can find pages like, here's 700 things to fix your hiccups. But the most common things you see are holding your breath, or breathing into a paper bag, maybe drinking that water from the other side of the glass, or breathing slowly. So what I want to do is kind of look at why these things might trigger the issue and why would these things help it. And that might help us understand what's going on and steps you can take to make this not show up so often. So to understand this, I'm going to put a link to a CO2 study in the description below this video. And in this study, they found that when there was an imbalance between oxygen and carbon dioxide in the system, that it created this alkalosis and the hiccups would show up. And when they restored more CO2 into the system, that all of a sudden that could balance things out and the hiccups would stop. So to understand this, we need to understand that CO2 is acidic. CO2 is this carbon dioxide. We exhale that when we breathe out, and CO2 has other functions in the body too. But we need to look at the fact that when there's a CO2 issue, it can create a lot of trouble. So we need to understand the Bohr effect and how that has the ability to show us some oxygen utilization issues in the body. So the Bohr effect tells us that when the blood is leaning too far on that alkaline side, that oxygen can't leave the blood and get down to the tissues where it needs to be. So that can create oxygen utilization issues. So if you're basically starving some tissues like this diaphragm of oxygen and it wasn't getting the oxygen that those cells needed to function correctly, that could create some discomfort. And why couldn't that create this spasm issue that seems to be creating these hiccups? So this alkalosis issue has the ability to create these oxygen utilization problems through this Bohr effect. And there's usually an alkalosis issue when there is a lack of CO2. The body likes to use CO2 as this method to help balance out the pH of the blood. The pH of the blood has to stay in a pretty narrow range or we just kind of die. And the body doesn't want that to happen. So what the body will do when there's not enough CO2 and that blood is leaning a little too far on that alkaline side, the body will slow the rate at which we breathe in an effort to hold on to more CO2 and then that will balance out the pH of the blood, and then oxygen can get down to the tissues where it needs to be and everything works great. So that's a mechanism that the body uses to help balance things out. But when we look at these triggers that are so commonly creating the hiccup issue, we see eating too fast, talking too fast, laughing. These are all ways that a person might be bringing in a lot more oxygen and maybe not exhaling as much CO2. So that has the ability to create an imbalance right there. And then when you look at the remedies that seem to work for so many people, when you hold your breath, you're holding on to more CO2. You're not expelling it. So when the body holds on to more CO2, it helps acidify that blood, get more oxygen down to the tissues so everything can work correctly. When you breathe into a paper bag, you're expelling your CO2 into that paper bag, and then you're inhaling it again. You're bringing the CO2 back into the system. So it's another way to increase that CO2 level. If you drink from the other side of the glass, if you try that, it's kind of hard to just breathe normally like you would here. You're kind of breathing this way, so it makes you kind of hold your breath while you're drinking that water. I've also heard from people that say that this movement can kind of stretch the diaphragm. They feel like that might be why that's benefiting. That's one that I used to always use when I used to get hiccups. I like to drink from the other side of the glass just because people will be like, what are you doing? Why are you a weirdo? But you also hear from people saying breathe slowly, like just take 5 seconds to breathe in and 5 seconds to breathe out. And that slower breath rate, you're just magnifying a tool that the body uses on its own to kind of balance out the pH of the blood. So if any of these tools here work for you to correct your hiccups, what you could do is just look at your own physiology to see, hey, maybe is my blood leaning a little bit more on that alkaline side? So just any of these things, like a little trigger, has the ability to push me over the fence and create these hiccup type issues. So what we like to see people do is look at their breath rate. So you can just set like a kitchen timer for a minute and then just try to relax and try to breathe normal. Don't try to think about it. You're going to mess yourself up and breathe faster or slower. But just try to relax and count the number of inhales that you take in a minute. Don't count inhale as 1 and exhale as 2. Just count the inhales. And what we really like to see is to see a person with about 14 to 18 or 19 breaths per minute. So anything lower than that is an indication. This is not diagnostic, it's just an indication, but it's an indication that that blood may be leaning a little bit more on that alkaline side and have the ability to create these oxygen utilization issues. When you're breathing slower, it's just the body trying to slow that rate to hold on to more CO2 and help acidify that blood. So if your breath rate is down like 8 or 9 or something like that, we see that all the time. That's a really strong indication that you may be leaning too far on this alkaline side, and that may be why the hiccups are showing up so often for you. So according to this study where the increase in CO2 really corrected the hiccup problems for the subjects, this makes a lot of sense. Why didn't anybody tell us this? So the thing to look at is, why would a person's bloodstream be leaning a little bit more on that alkaline side? Why would the body be creating less CO2? So one thing we want to think about is a possible insulin resistance issue. So CO2 is a byproduct of processing carbohydrates. So we consume carbohydrates and we process those, and that can create more CO2 in the system. So either if somebody can't really process carbohydrates correctly because they're insulin resistant, then that would have a lower level of CO2. When we look at our type 2 diabetic clients, most of them have a lower breath rate, and their bloodstream seems to be leaning on that alkaline side just because they're not producing as much CO2 because they're not processing carbohydrates effectively. Not that they're not eating them, they could be eating them, but you need to be able to process them correctly to create that CO2 byproduct. Also, maybe too much carb restriction. That could be creating a problem. A lot of people do keto diets now and carnivore diets. These are very popular and very effective and very beneficial for many things. I'm a fan of these diets. I use these diets myself. I use it with a lot of my clients. But these diets have the ability to create imbalances for some people. So it's really not about doing the diet that all the cool kids are doing. It's about doing the diet that's appropriate for you and your body chemistry. So over time, for some folks, not everybody, don't get your panties in a wad, I'm not talking about everybody, but for some folks, this has the ability to create these alkalosis issues from the lack of carbohydrates. So over time, maybe the diet worked great for you in the beginning, but over time, maybe your blood started to lean on the alkaline alkaline side, it can create some trouble. That's kind of what happened to me, but it took like 5 to 8 years before any trouble showed up for me. So that's why these diets work great for some people and some people don't do so great. Excessive carbohydrates can also create an alkalosis issue in the blood from pulling too much calcium out of the tissues into the blood and alkalizing the blood that way. Also, some people might be doing some kind of alkalizing diet. There's a lot of pH gurus out there that tell us that everybody needs to alkalize or we're going to be dead by Thursday, and there's a lot of fiction in that. If you want to understand that better, we'll put a link in the description below on our video for the truth about pH balance so you can dig into that a little bit. And if you have GERD or acid reflux issues, we'll put a link in the description below for our video on why do I have acid reflux so you can understand how to correct that problem in case that's creating the discomfort. And if you want to learn more about a possible alkalosis issue and a lack of CO2, the Appendix C of my book, Kick Your Fat in the Nuts, goes into this a lot. It can help you understand steps you can take to correct it. And the book is available on Amazon, but I'm going to put a link in the description below so you can get the whole thing totally for free and you can just jump to Appendix C to understand that stuff a little bit better. So you can see there's a variety of issues that can create this chronic hiccup issue. But if you can do something as simple as just counting your breaths with a timer and see is there an apparent issue that may need more investigation, then that's pretty easy to do. Now, if you want to think, oh, maybe this hiatal hernia is creating a problem for me, you can jump over right now and check out our video on how to correct a hiatal hernia to see if that might help the issue for you. I can't wait to hear about your results.